De la mano de Jesús, we're back here to continue reading chapter 9 so that we can finish reading our chapter a day. And I stopped at section 5. So chapter 9 is entitled The Plan of Forgiveness. It has 8 sections. We've read 5 out of 8. So the first one is asking for what you want. The second one, hearing God's answer in everyone. The third one, the correction of error. The fourth one, looking beyond error. The fifth one, the unhealed healer. And I'm going to start reading the sixth section, the witnesses to your reality. The witnesses to your reality. 1. How can you become increasingly aware of the Holy Spirit in you except by His effects? You cannot see Him with your eyes, nor hear Him with your ears. How then can you perceive Him at all? If you inspire joy and others react to you with joy, even though you are not experiencing joy yourself, there must be something in you that is capable of producing it. If it is in you and can produce joy, and if you see that it does produce joy in others, you must be dissociating it in yourself. 2. It seems to you that the Holy Spirit does not produce joy consistently in you only because you do not consistently arouse joy in others. Their reactions to you are your evaluations of His consistency. When you are inconsistent, you will not always give rise to joy, and so you will not always recognize His consistency. What you offer to your brother, you offer to him because he cannot go beyond your offering in his giving. This him is capitalized. It's talking about the Holy Spirit. This is not because he, capital letter, limits his giving, but simply because you have limited your receiving. 3. The will to receive is the will to accept. If your brothers are part of you, will you accept them? Only they can teach you what you are, and your learning is the result of what you taught them. What you call upon in them, you call upon in yourself. And as you call upon it in them, it becomes real to you. God has but one Son, knowing them all as one. Only God Himself is more than they, but they are not less than He is. Would you know what this means? 4. If what you do to my brother, you do to me, and if you do everything for yourself because we are part of you, everything we do belongs to you as well. Every son God created is part of you and shares His glory with you. His glory belongs to Him, but it is equally yours. You cannot then be less glorious than He is. He is more than you only because He created you, but not even this would He keep from you. Therefore, you can create as He did, and your dissociation will not alter this. Neither God's light nor yours is dimmed because you do not see. 5. Because the sonship must create as one, you remember creation whenever you recognize part of creation. Each part you remember adds to your wholeness because each part is whole. Wholeness is indivisible, but you cannot learn your wholeness until you see it everywhere. You can know yourself only as God knows His Son, for knowledge is shared with God. When you awaken Him, you will know your magnitude by accepting His limitlessness as yours. But meanwhile, you will judge it as you judge your brothers, and will accept it as you accept theirs. 6. You are not yet awake. but you can learn how to awaken. Very simply, the Holy Spirit teaches you to awaken others. As you see them awaken, you will learn what waking means. And because you have willed to wake them, their gratitude and their appreciation of what you have given them will teach you its value. They will become the witnesses to your reality as you were created witnesses to God's. But when the sonship comes together and accepts its oneness, it will be known by its creations, who witness to its reality as the Son does to the Father. 7. Miracles have no place in eternity because they are reparative. But while you still need healing, your miracles are the only witnesses to your reality which you can recognize. You cannot perform a miracle for yourself because miracles are a way of giving acceptance and receiving it. In times, the giving comes first, though they are simultaneous in eternity, where they cannot be separated. When you have learned that they are the same, the need for time is over. Eternity is out time, its only dimension being always. 8. But this cannot mean anything to you until you remember God's open arms and finally know His open mind. Like Him, you are always, quote unquote, in His mind and with a mind like His. In your open mind are your creations in perfect communication, born of perfect understanding. Could you but accept one of them, you would not want anything the world has to offer. Everything else would be totally meaningless. God's meaning is incomplete without you, and you are incomplete without your creations. 9. Accept your brother in this world and accept nothing else. For in him you will find your creations because he created them with you. You will never know that you are a co-creator with God until you learn your brother is a co-creator with you. God's will is your salvation. Would he not have given you the means to find it? If he wills you to have it, he must have made it possible and very easy to obtain it. 10. Your brothers are everywhere. You do not have to seek far for salvation. Every minute and every second gives you a chance to save yourself. Do not lose these chances, not because they will not return, but because delay of joy is needless. God wills your perfect happiness now. Is it possible that this is not also your will? And is it possible that this is not also the will of your brothers? Consider then that in this joint will you are all united, and in this only. There will be disagreement on everything else, but not in this. This then is where peace abides, and you abide in peace when you so decide. So we just finished reading section 7 of chapter 9. I'm reading chapter 9. The plan of forgiveness. I've read 6 sections. The first one, asking for what you want. Second one, hearing God's answer in everyone. Third, the correction of error. 4, looking beyond error. 5, the unhealed healer. 6, the witness to your reality. And I'm going to start reading section 7, the 2 evaluations. Section 7, the 2 evaluations. 1. But you cannot abide in peace unless you accept the atonement, because the atonement is the way to peace. The reason is very simple and so obvious that it is often overlooked. This is because the ego is afraid of the obvious, since obviousness is the essential characteristic of reality. You cannot overlook it. unless you are not looking. It is perfectly obvious that if the Holy Spirit looks with love on all he perceives, he looks with love on you. His evaluation of you is based on knowledge of what you are, and so he evaluates you truly. And this evaluation must be in your mind because he is too. The ego is also in your mind because you have accepted it there. Its evaluation of you, however, is the exact opposite of the Holy Spirit's because the ego does not love you. It is unaware of what you are and wholly mistrustful of everything it perceives because its own perceptions are so shifting. The ego is therefore capable of suspiciousness at best and viciousness at worst. That is its range. It cannot exceed it because of its uncertainty, and it can never go beyond it because it can never be certain. 3. You then have two conflicting evaluations of yourself in your mind, and they cannot both be true. You do not yet realize how completely different these evaluations are because you do not understand how lofty the Holy Spirit's perception of you really is. He is not deceived by anything you do because he never forgets what you are. The ego is deceived by everything you do, even when you respond to the Holy Spirit, because at such times its confusion increases. The ego is therefore particularly likely to attack you when you react lovingly, but because it has evaluated you as unloving and you are going against its judgment. 4. The ego will begin to attack your motives as soon as they become clearly out of accord with its perception of you. This is when it will shift abruptly from suspiciousness to viciousness because its uncertainty is increased. But it is surely pointless to attack in return. What can this mean except that you are agreeing with the ego's evaluation of what you are? If you are willing to see yourself as unloving, you will not be happy. You are condemning yourself and must therefore regard yourself as inadequate. 5. Would you look to the ego to help you escape from a sense of inadequacy it has produced and must maintain for its own existence? Can you escape from its evaluation of you by using its methods for keeping this picture intact? You cannot evaluate an insane belief system from within it. Its own range precludes this. You can only go beyond it and look back from a point where sanity exists and see the contrast. Only by this contrast can insanity be judged as insane. 6. Paragraph 6. With the grandeur of God in you, you have chosen to be little and lament your littleness. Within the system which dictated this choice, the lament is inevitable. Your littleness is taken for granted here, and you do not ask, who granted it? The question is meaningless within the ego's thought system because it opens the whole thought system to the question. We said before that the ego does not know what a real question is. Lack of knowledge of any kind is always associated with unwillingness to know and produces a total lack of knowledge simply because knowledge is total. Not to question your littleness is therefore to deny all knowledge and keep the ego's whole thought system intact. 7. You cannot retain part of a thought system because it can be questioned only at its foundation. And this must be questioned from beyond it because within it, its foundation does stand. The Holy Spirit judges against the reality of the ego's thought system merely because he knows its foundation is not true. Therefore, Nothing that arises from it means anything. The Holy Spirit judges every belief you hold in terms of where it comes from. If it comes from God, He knows it to be true. If it does not, He knows it is meaningless. 8. Whenever you question your value, say, God Himself is incomplete without me. This is chapter 9, section 7. God Himself is incomplete without me. Remember this when the ego speaks, and you will not hear it. The truth about you is so lofty that nothing that is unworthy of God is worthy of you. What are we remembering? God Himself is incomplete without me. Choose then what you want in these terms, and accept nothing that you should not offer to God as wholly fitting for Him, for you do not want anything else. Return your part of Him, and He shall give you all of Himself in exchange for returning what belongs to Him and renders Him complete. So we just finished reading section 7 of 8 sections in chapter 9. Chapter 9 is entitled The Plan of Forgiveness. The first section, asking for what you want. The second one, hearing God's answer in everyone. Third one, the correction of error. 4, looking beyond error. 5, the unhealed healer. 6, the witness to your reality. 7, the 2 evaluations, and I'm going to read section 8, grandeur versus grandiosity. Grandeur versus grandiosity. Grandeur is of God and only of Him. Therefore, it is in you. Whenever you become aware of it, however dimly, you abandon the ego automatically, because in the presence of the grandeur of God, the meaninglessness of the ego becomes perfectly apparent. Though it does not understand this, the ego believes that its enemy has struck and attempts to offer gifts to induce you to return it to its protection. Self-inflation is the only offering it can make. The grandiosity of the ego is its alternative to the grandeur of God. Which will you choose? 2. Grandiosity is always a cover for despair. It is without hope because it is not real. It is an attempt to counteract your littleness based on the belief that the littleness is real. Without this belief, grandiosity is meaningless, and you could not possibly want it. The essence of grandiosity is competitiveness because it always involves attack. It is a delusional attempt to outdo, but not to undo. We said before that the ego vacillates between suspiciousness and viciousness. It remains suspicious as long as you despair of yourself. It shifts to viciousness whenever you will not tolerate self-debasement and seek relief. Then it offers you the delusion of attack as a solution. 3. The ego does not know the difference between grandeur and grandiosity because it does not know the differences between miracle impulses and ego alien beliefs of its own. We once said that the ego is aware of threats, but does not make appropriate distinctions where 2 entirely different kinds of threat So let me reread that. We once said that the ego is aware of threats, but does not make appropriate distinctions between 2 entirely different kinds of threat to its existence. Its own profound sense of vulnerability renders it incapable of judgment, except in terms of attack. When it experiences threats, its only decision is whether to attack now or withdraw to attack later. If you accept its offering of grandiosity, it will attack immediately. If you do not, It will wait. 4. The ego is immobilized in the presence of God's grandeur because His grandeur establishes your freedom. Even the faintest hint of your reality literally drives the ego from your mind because of a complete lack of investment in it. Grandeur is totally without illusion, and because it is real, it is compellingly convincing. But the conviction of reality will not remain with you unless you do not allow the ego to attack it. Excuse me, and thank you. 5. The ego will make every effort to recover and mobilize its energies against your release. It will tell you that you are insane and argue that grandeur cannot be a real part of you because of the littleness in which it believes. But your grandeur is not delusional because you did not make it. You have made grandiosity and are afraid of it because it is a form of attack. But your grandeur is of God, who created it out of His love. From your grandeur you can only bless, because your grandeur is your abundance. By blessing, you hold it in your mind, protecting it from illusions and keeping yourself in the mind of God. 6. Remember always that you cannot be anywhere except in the mind of God. When you forget this, you will despair and you will attack. The ego depends solely on your willingness to tolerate it. But if you are willing to look upon your grandeur, you can despair, and therefore you cannot despair, and therefore you cannot want the ego. Your grandeur is God's loss to the ego because it is true. Littleness and grandeur cannot coexist, nor is it possible for them to alternate in your awareness. Littleness and grandiosity can and must, since both are untrue and therefore of the same level. Being the level of shift, it is experienced as shifting, and extremes are its essential characteristic. 7. But truth and littleness are denials of each other, and grandeur is truth. Truth does not vacillate, it is always true. When grandeur slips away from you, you have replaced it with something you have made. Perhaps it is the belief in littleness, perhaps it is the belief in grandiosity, but it must be insane because it is not true. The grandeur will never deceive you, but your illusions always will. Illusions are deceptions. 8. You cannot triumph, but you are exalted. And in your exalted state, you seek others like you and rejoice with them. It is easy to distinguish grandeur from grandiosity simply because love is returned, but pride is not. Pride will not produce miracles and therefore will deprive you of the true witnesses to your reality. Truth is not obscure nor hidden, but its obviousness to you lies in the joy you bring to its witnesses who show it to you. They attest to your grandeur, but they cannot attest to pride because pride is not shared. 9. God wants you to behold what He created because it is His joy. It is His joy. Can your grandeur be arrogant when God Himself witnesses to it? And what can be real that has no witnesses? What good can come of it? And if no good can come of it, the Holy Spirit cannot use it. What He cannot transform to the will of God does not exist at all. Grandiosity is delusional because it is used to replace your grandeur. Yet, what God has created cannot be replaced. 10. God is incomplete without you simply because his grandeur is total and you cannot be missing from it. You are altogether irreplaceable in the mind of God. No one else can fill your part of it. And while you leave your part of it empty, your eternal place merely waits for your return. God, through his voice, reminds you of it, and God himself keeps your extensions safe within it. But you do not know them until you return to them. 11. You cannot replace the kingdom, and you cannot replace yourself. God, who knows your value, would not have it so that so it is not so. Your value is in God's mind, and therefore not in you alone. To accept yourself as he created you cannot be arrogant, because it is the denial of arrogance. To accept your littleness is arrogant, because it means that you believe that your evaluation of yourself is truer than God's. But if truth is indivisible, then your evaluation of yourself must be God's. 12. You did not establish your value, and it needs no defense. Nothing can attack or it prevail over it. Nothing can attack it or prevail over it. It does not vary. It merely is. Ask the Holy Spirit what it is, and he will tell you. But do not be afraid of his answer, for it comes from God. It is an exalted answer because of its source, but the source is true, and so is its answer. Listen and do not question what you hear, for God does not deceive. He would have you replace the ego's belief in littleness with his own exalted answer to the question of your being, so that you can cease to question it and know it for what it is. Thank you. This is the end of chapter 9. So chapter 9 is divided into two sections, A and B. One went from section 1 to section 5, and the second one goes from section 6 to section 8. Thank you so much. See you tomorrow.